Close your eyes. Imagine yourself 100,000 years ago. You're not scrolling TikTok. You're not binge-watching Netflix. You're sitting in a drafty cave, wearing the exact same mammoth fur outfit you've been wearing since puberty. And your crush is judging you, not for your haircut, but for the shape of your forehead. That's right. Welcome to the original influencer era. Except instead of likes, you got survival points. And instead of Photoshop, people just didn't feed you if they thought you were ugly. Prehistoric beauty standards were brutal. Forget six-pack abs or Botox. Imagine being evaluated for your mate value based on brow ridges, molar size, and whether you had enough body fat to survive the Ice Age, but not so much that you slowed down the mammoth hunt. And oh, you thought acne was embarrassing. Try having your entire tribe agree that your skull slope meant you were probably not smart enough to pass on genes. Rough crowd, tonight, we're diving into the bizarre, hilarious, and sometimes disturbing beauty standards of prehistoric humans. This is the story of what it meant to be hot in an era where deodorant didn't exist, eyeliner was ash-smeared on your face, and lip filler meant eating berries until your mouth turned purple. So pull up your blanket, get cozy, and let's explore how our ancestors judged each other's looks. Because if you think modern Instagram filters are bad, just wait until you hear what counted as attractive when saber-toothed cats roamed the neighborhood. Imagine the world, not as it is now, filled with streetlights, neon billboards, and endless screens glowing in the night, but as it was 100,000 years ago. There is no hum of electricity, no faint traffic noise in the background, just the quiet crackle of fire, the slow sigh of wind curling through trees, and the low murmur of people huddled together in a cave. You're wrapped in whatever hides could be stitched together, smelling faintly of smoke, and your mind, even in its prehistoric simplicity, still worries about the same thing people fret about today. How do I look? Because whether you're hunting woolly mammoths or swiping on dating apps, appearance has always mattered in some way. Tonight, as you drift towards sleep, let's step back into that cave, sit among our distant ancestors, and whisper about what counted as beautiful, or at least acceptable, when the Ice Age winds howled outside. And where better to begin than the one part of the body people can never ignore, even in the dark glow of a fire, the face, specifically the forehead. Now, in the modern world, foreheads rarely get much attention, unless someone's complaining about wrinkles or obsessing over bangs. It's just a forehead. But for early humans, this patch of skull real estate carried enormous weight. Your forehead told a story about your ancestry, your health, your strength, and even your ability to fit into the group. Imagine being judged for something you couldn't possibly change. Not the style of your haircut, not your outfit, but the slope of your bone. Cro-Magnons and Neanderthals had distinctive brow ridges, heavy and protruding, like built-in sunglasses. These weren't just functional for keeping sweat out of the eyes. They were signals. A thick, pronounced brow ridge suggested strength, virility, and toughness. It was like having permanent resting, "Don't mess with me" face. And in a dangerous world, that mattered. But of course, beauty standards are never simple. What appealed to one group might not have impressed another. For some, a smoother forehead, the kind we modern humans have signaled higher intelligence, better communication, a face more open and approachable. Imagine sitting around the fire and watching as one hunter with thick, sloping brows tried to impress potential mates by splitting logs with his bare hands, while another, with a softer, rounder forehead, dazzled everyone by telling a story or making them laugh. Which one got the better reception depends on the night, the hunger level, and how close the saber-toothed cats were lurking. And that is the strange, almost comical part of it. The forehead was not just bone. It was the original social media profile picture. A high, rounded forehead suggested you had a big brain tucked behind it, capable of problem solving, maybe even predicting when the herd would move, or how to trap a mammoth more efficiently. A sloped forehead, by contrast, screamed raw physicality. Either way, someone was judging. Imagine being told by your tribe, "Sorry, you're not cave crush material. Your frontal lobe housing unit just doesn't meet the vibe check." Brutal. It's easy to laugh, but think about how deeply this shaped our evolution. Modern humans, Homo sapiens, became the dominant species, in part because we emphasized communication, planning, and social bonds. Our skulls flattened, our brow ridges diminished, our foreheads grew taller. That wasn't just a random accident. It was sexy. Yes, intelligence literally became attractive. A smooth forehead wasn't only convenient for hats thousands of years later. It was a signal that you could think, share ideas, and cooperate. Over time, that preference turned into survival itself. Now picture lying in the cave, firelight flickering across faces. The shadows exaggerate every brow ridge and forehead curve. Someone laughs, someone sighs, and your gaze drifts to the most prominent foreheads in the group. Would you judge them? Probably, because humans have always done this, even subconsciously. Anthropologists studying fossil skulls can tell when certain features became more common because they were chosen over and over in mates. It's a weird thought. Your forehead right now, the one you don't even think about, is the product of countless prehistoric beauty contests. That slightly higher dome? That's because some ancient person thought a thinker was cuter than a bruiser. Of course, not every prehistoric forehead was so carefully appraised. Sometimes, beauty standards were simply practical. A sloping forehead and thick brow ridges also helped protect the face from impacts, useful when life involved rocks, clubs, and accidents with fire. In that sense, a forehead was like armor, and maybe your ancestors thought of it less like beauty and more like durability. But then again, people are people. They probably gossiped about whose skull shape was better looking. Yes, gossip is older than farming. Even in a time of spears and mammoths, somebody was whispering, "Did you see Ug's forehead? Way too flat. No thanks." And that's the image I want you to drift off with. A world where the hottest gossip wasn't about celebrity scandals, but about the angle of a forehead bone. Now, as your breathing slows and your body sinks deeper into rest, let's move from foreheads down a little lower to the heavy ridges that rested above the eyes. If foreheads were the billboard of the face, then eyebrows, or in this case, eyebrow ridges, were the neon signs. The truth is, prehistoric people didn't have neat little brows you could thread or wax. They had bone ridges so thick you could balance a small lizard on them. These ridges gave the face a permanent scowl, like everyone was perpetually unimpressed. Imagine your tribe sitting together, every single person looking like they just got cut off in traffic. That was daily life. But here's the twist. Those ridges weren't ugly then. They were status symbols. A big ridge meant you could handle yourself in a fight, carry heavy loads, and maybe even scare away predators just by glaring at them. It was intimidation made permanent. Think of it like a natural pair of sunglasses that also doubled as a warning label. People with massive brow ridges probably seemed more trustworthy as protectors. Need someone to guard the cave while you nap? Call Ridgy McStrongface over there. That was the vibe. Yet, attractiveness is always relative. Not everyone swooned over angry caveman face. Just as today, some people swoon for soft, gentle eyes. In the past, a smoother brow might have suggested kindness, approachability, or even better, parenting skills. Imagine a hunter with enormous ridges trying to flirt, only to realize he looked perpetually furious. No, I promise, I'm smiling under all this bone. Tough luck, buddy. In that way, eyebrow ridges were the prehistoric equivalent of bad lighting. Sometimes you couldn't tell if someone was into you, or just ready to wrestle a bear. Scientists think these ridges slowly shrank because they weren't as useful once social cooperation became more important than intimidation. Subtle facial expressions mattered more, and heavy ridges hid them. So, over time, smoother brows became the trend. In other words, hotness literally evolved toward looking less angry. You owe your eyebrow shape right now to countless generations who said, "No thanks. I prefer someone whose face doesn't look like a thundercloud." Beauty standards actually reshaped our skulls. And that's the magic of it. The hilarious absurdity of human history. What counted as beautiful 100,000 years ago isn't just forgotten gossip. It's written into our very bones. Our foreheads and brow ridges today are the fossils of ancient attraction, the silent proof that even in caves, people cared about how they looked. So as you drift deeper into relaxation, picture those glowing fires, the crackling wood, the gossip, whispered in languages lost to time. And remember, someone survived, reproduced, and eventually became your ancestor, all because their forehead was trendy. Long before neon signs, long before skyscrapers or Wi-Fi signals zipping invisibly through the air, there was darkness, deep, heavy darkness that wrapped around early humans every night. Imagine the hush of a prehistoric plain after sunset, the chill settling into your bones, the low crackle of fire being the only interruption in a world otherwise filled with animal sounds. And in that quiet, in that void, people dreamed, they hallucinated, they saw visions that didn't make sense, at least not in the practical way. To them, these visions weren't just flickers of imagination or tricks of the brain. They were messages, proof, evidence that there was something more than the physical world, something vast and invisible, a spirit world that touched their own. When you close your eyes tonight, imagine yourself as one of them, lying on a bed of woven grass or animal skin, your stomach empty, or maybe filled with something strange you gathered from the forest. You drift, not just into sleep, but into a hallucinatory state. Patterns move behind your eyelids. Colors swirl in ways you've never seen in daylight. Shapes form and dissolve, sometimes animal-like, sometimes human, sometimes something in between. Modern science would call it the brain processing chemicals, lack of food, or stress. But for them, this was proof, undeniable proof, that another realm existed right alongside their own. And that realm was powerful, a place where ancestors lived, where gods or monsters waited, where meaning itself was forged. You have to remember, in a time with no written language, no internet forums, no scientific journals, everything had to be explained through experience. If someone starved for days and then began to see a shimmering figure guiding them to water, how could that not be real? If another person chewed a strange root and suddenly felt their dead father's voice in their ear, whispering warnings about the hunt. How could that be dismissed as coincidence? These experiences stacked up, person after person, generation after generation, until the concept of a spirit world wasn't just belief, it was woven into the fabric of everyday life. It's funny when you think about it. Today, someone tells you they saw a glowing figure in the sky. You might smile politely, or suggest they get more sleep. Back then, you would take that seriously, because that vision could mean life or death. If the spirit warned of danger, you listened. If it promised success in the hunt, you carried that courage into the field. The hallucination became not just a curiosity, but a tool for survival. And in the cold, harsh world of prehistory, any tool that helped you make sense of chaos was invaluable. Now, here's where it gets almost comedic. Imagine a tribe sitting around the fire, one man describing how he met a glowing deer who told him to cross the river tomorrow. The rest of the tribe nods solemnly. Then another speaks up. Funny, because last night I saw a giant bird with 3 heads telling me to stay away from the river. Now the group has to decide. Deer says cross, bird says don't. Who do you trust? The entire tribe's survival might rest on which hallucination gets voted the most reliable. In a way, these moments were prehistoric debates, and the evidence presented wasn't charts or data, but visions pulled from someone's altered state of mind. The brain was the courtroom, and spirits were the witnesses. And what about the consistency? Anthropologists studying cave art and oral traditions have noticed that certain visions recur again and again across time and geography. Spirals, animal-human hybrids, glowing figures, things people saw without ever comparing notes across continents. It's as if the human brain, under stress or under the influence of certain plants, produces the same inner cinema. And when entire communities reported the same shapes and beings, that strengthened belief. Clearly, this wasn't imagination. This was a shared window into another reality. And if everyone saw it, how could it be denied? It's soothing to imagine those nights. The fire dimming, sparks rising into the night sky, like tiny souls escaping into the heavens, while one member of the group shared their vision. The children lean forward, wide-eyed, the adults nodding gravely, storing every word as if it were instruction from the universe itself. Humor existed. Even then, you can almost hear a teenager rolling their eyes at yet another spirit, deer story. But the weight of belief was undeniable, and these visions weren't just entertainment, they were cosmology. They explained death, the stars, the weather, everything beyond human control. They offered comfort in the face of endless fear. Drift further, deeper into that world, and you'll notice something remarkable. Hallucinations weren't private experiences. They became collective evidence, stories everyone could agree upon. If one person saw a dead ancestor during a fever, and another person saw theirs in a dream the next night, suddenly, the tribe had proof. There was a place where the dead lingered. There was continuity after death. And once you believe that, your entire worldview changes. Life isn't just a struggle until the end. It's a test, a passage into another reality where ancestors watch, spirits guide, and perhaps judgment waits. The spirit world was both comfort and control. Live well, the spirits smile on you. Live poorly, and you're haunted. It was morality, carved out of visions. Even now, as you listen, maybe your own mind flickers with imagery when you drift near sleep. Strange landscapes, half-formed faces, dream logic that feels absurd in daylight. Think about how powerful that would feel without centuries of science to explain it. The ordinary sliding into the extraordinary, and the extraordinary shaping the rules of life. That is the power of hallucinations in prehistoric belief. And that is why the spirit world wasn't just an idea. It was the truth, experienced firsthand, over and over, until it was as real as the fire keeping you warm. When we shift from individual visions to group experiences, the story takes on another layer. Imagine dozens of people gathered around a fire. The flames dance, shadows stretch, smoke rises into the air and curls around their faces. Someone tosses a bundle of herbs or strange plants into the flames, and suddenly the smoke thickens, bitter and sweet, clinging to throats and lungs. People cough, they laugh, their eyes water. And then, something begins to change. The rhythm of the drums quickens. Voices chant in unison. The fire seems to glow brighter, or perhaps it's simply the eyes of those staring into it, widening as their minds slip sideways. A communal trip has begun. Group rituals like this served many purposes. They united the tribe, reinforced bonds, and created shared experiences that transcended ordinary life. But at their core, they were also about entering the same altered state together, stepping into that spirit world as a community. When individuals hallucinated alone, their visions were personal, sometimes doubted. But when everyone was breathing the same smoke, swaying to the same rhythm, and seeing the same flickering shapes in the firelight, there was no question. The spirits were here, with them, undeniable and present. And yes, you can picture the comic side. Half the tribe giggling uncontrollably, while another half suddenly insists they see the ancestor of all mammoths dancing in the flames. Someone tries to stand, only to wobble dramatically and collapse back into the circle, causing a ripple of laughter. But behind the humor, something deeper was happening. These shared, altered states gave the group meaning. They turned random hallucinations into collective visions. When everyone trips together, the story writes itself. The spirits must be speaking to us all. Firelight made everything more dramatic. The brain is already wired to see faces in patterns, so staring into the dancing shadows was like a cinema of spirits. Shapes shifted constantly, appearing, disappearing, beckoning, combined with smoke inhalation or the effects of plants thrown into the fire. The visions became vivid, overwhelming, and because everyone saw them together, they weren't dismissed as imagination. They were treated as revelation. A glowing figure appearing in the flames might be taken as a divine message. A flickering animal shape might mean success in the hunt tomorrow. The ritual gave meaning where randomness existed. It made chaos feel like order. Anthropologists believe these rituals may have been the roots of religion, the earliest forms of ceremony that united tribes, not just physically, but spiritually. To sit together, breathe the same smoke, chant the same sounds, and see the same shapes wasn't just bonding, it was identity. You weren't just surviving beside each other. You were traveling to the same other world together, guided by fire and sound. And when the ritual ended, when the smoke cleared and the chanting faded, the group emerged closer, bound by the memory of what they had seen. And yes, modern humans still crave this. Concerts, festivals, shared rituals of any kind mimic this prehistoric longing. The flashing lights of a stage, the pounding rhythm of music, the way thousands of people sway in unison, these are echoes of those communal trips. Our brains never stopped wanting that shared escape. Back then, it was fire and smoke, Today, it might be neon and bass. The same hunger lives on. So, as you drift deeper into rest, picture it, a circle of people, their faces glowing in orange firelight, smoke curling upward as chants rise and fall like waves. They laugh, they cry, they see shapes, both terrifying and beautiful, and together they believe. For them, there is no doubt. The spirit world is real, and tonight they have walked into it as one. Close your eyes, slow your breathing, and let yourself drift to a time when survival was a daily calculation, when nothing about life was guaranteed beyond the rising of the sun and the biting of the wind. Imagine standing in a world where the seasons didn't just bring inconvenience but mortal danger, where food wasn't a matter of supermarket aisles, but of luck, skill, and sheer persistence. In that world, your body itself was a kind of message to everyone around you. It whispered whether you were healthy, whether you had endured the last famine, whether you could endure the next. And more than anything, it announced, without words, whether you carried the most valuable currency of all, stored energy. Today, people flip through glossy magazines or scroll endlessly online, fretting over abs or waistlines. But in the deep past, on windswept plains and inside cramped caves, the language of beauty was measured in calories tucked away under skin. Skinny did not suggest chic elegance. Skinny suggested risk, fragility, a candle flickering dangerously close to going out. Plumpness, however, told a different story. To have extra fat meant you had survived past famines, that your body had banked the riches of good seasons and was prepared for the lean ones. A belly wasn't just a belly. It was proof of resilience, a quiet promise to your community that you were strong enough to make it through the winter. Imagine a cold night. The fire is burning, but the draft sneaks through cracks in the walls. Everyone is gathered close, shoulders pressed together, the smell of smoke heavy in the air. Food has been scarce this week. People glance around the circle, not just at faces, but at bodies. They notice who looks gaunt, whose cheeks have hollowed, who is moving slower. And they notice, too, who still has roundness in their form, who carries that extra cushion of safety. In that moment, the person with more body fat isn't mocked. They're admired, desired, because that softness represents life. Archaeologists have uncovered figurines that tell us exactly how much this was valued. The famous Venus figurines, small, carved statues of women with wide hips, heavy thighs, and pronounced bellies, are the Ice Age's declaration of admiration for body fat. They weren't celebrating frailty or delicacy. They were celebrating abundance, fertility, survival against the odds. Imagine holding one of those figurines in your hand. The carver exaggerated the curves, making sure the message was clear. This, right here, is beauty, because this is survival. And of course, there was nuance. Too much stored energy could make mobility harder, and mobility was sometimes the difference between life and death. But balance was everything. To be completely lean was terrifying. To be robust and padded was reassuring. The ideal was always shaped by the environment. In times of plenty, maybe leaner bodies were less alarming. But as soon as food grew scarce, plumpness shot back into the top tier of desirability. It was survival politics, written into flesh. If you smile at this, that's good, because humor helps the story settle in. Picture a scrawny young hunter trying to flirt by flexing his arms, only to be gently ignored by someone who preferred the robust figure of his fuller friend. Or imagine a whispered conversation at the fire. Yes, he can run fast, but will he still be standing when the snow lingers 2 more months? A cruel joke, maybe, but one with life or death seriousness underneath. That's how the politics of body fat worked. And while we can laugh at the idea of people gossiping about hips and bellies around the fire, the truth is, they were doing what humans always do, looking for the signals of who could survive, who could thrive, and who could carry the tribe forward. In their world, fat was not frivolous. It was sacred. It was fertility and warmth, abundance and endurance. It was proof that you could make it through famine and still have the strength to bring life into the world. So as you let your body sink deeper into rest, remember this. Once upon a time, softness was the highest compliment. Once upon a time, fat was not feared, but celebrated. A miracle of biology that meant survival. And maybe, just maybe, there's comfort in knowing that your ancestors admired in themselves what so many today forget to honor. Now let yourself drift even deeper as we move from the curves of flesh to the cloak of hair. Long before razors hummed in bathrooms or stylists shaped and straightened strands, hair was one of humanity's most striking features, and its meaning changed constantly with the shifting of climate. Sometimes it was protection, sometimes it was attraction, sometimes it was an inconvenience, but always, it was noticed. Imagine your ancestors stepping out of a cave into icy winds. The ground is hard with frost, the air so cold it bites the inside of your lungs. In that world, a hairy body wasn't a joke. It was a luxury. Hair trapped warmth, shielded skin, and helped prevent heat from leaching out into the merciless cold. To run your hands over someone with a thick coat of hair was to feel survival itself. They were warm to the touch, a safe place to curl against at night when the wind screamed and the fire burned low. In that season, hairiness was beauty. It was protection you could hold. But seasons changed, climates shifted, and preferences followed. Now imagine yourself in a hotter region, where the sun burned high and the air was heavy and damp. There, hairiness became less a blessing and more a burden. Sweat clung to it, bugs nested in it, and the heat became unbearable. Smooth skin suddenly meant agility, coolness, relief. A less hairy body gleamed in the sun, not drenched in sweat, but moving freely, less weighed down. In that place, smoothness became the admired trait. So hairiness went in and out of fashion, not because of whims alone, but because of survival. Picture a group sitting by the fire after a long, hot day. One man's beard is matted, holding onto the smell of the hunt, while another's smoother face seems fresh in comparison. The jokes write themselves. Someone probably teased, "Careful, don't trip over your own chin bush." Humor, even then, softened the awkwardness of shifting preferences. Beauty could change with the season, and hair was the easiest canvas to notice. Head hair was its own language. It could be long, braided, decorated with beads or shells, tied back or left wild. In colder climates, long hair offered insulation. In warmer ones, maybe it was cut short with stone tools or plaited to keep it manageable. Beards may have signaled wisdom and maturity, smooth chins, youth and vitality. Body hair fluctuated with migration, with climate, with taste. Each shift was both practical and aesthetic. And always, hair was social. It was touched, admired, mocked, even envied. Some probably wished for more of it when shivering, others for less when sweating. The politics of hair were as fickle as weather itself. But here's the deeper truth. Hair wasn't just style. Over millennia, our species shed most of its fur, leaving only patches as markers under arms, atop heads, across faces. This wasn't random. It was evolution shaped by preference and practicality. If enough people desired less hair in their partners, less hair became the norm. If thick locks signaled strength in one climate, then those genes carried forward. Hair became not just protection, but communication across generations. So as you rest now, imagine lying down beside your ancestors, one with a thick beard glittering with frost, another with smooth skin gleaming in firelight. Each one attractive in their own way, each one reflecting what the world around them demanded. Hair, or lack of it, was never trivial. It was survival and beauty braided together, changing as quickly as the seasons, but always shaping the way people saw each other. Your own hair today, whether thick or thin, curly or straight, is the legacy of those shifting desires. It is evolution's memory of countless whispered judgments and affectionate touches, of laughter at shaggy beards and admiration for glossy braids. It is proof that what grows from your body has always carried meaning. And tonight, as you drift into sleep, you carry that history with you. Every strand, a thread back through time. Scars tell stories, even now. A small line across someone's finger speaks of a kitchen accident. A faint mark on a knee remembers a childhood fall from a bike. But in the deep past, long before stitches and antiseptic and neatly written medical notes, scars were more than accidents. They were badges of survival, etched permanently into skin, a record of battles fought and endured. Imagine sitting in the flickering glow of firelight, surrounded by people who had no written words, no photographs, no social media profiles to display their adventures. Their bodies were the biographies. And a scar was proof you had stepped into danger and come back alive. Close your eyes and picture a hunter, returning from the plains with a long mark across his chest, where a bison's horn had grazed him. The tribe gathers around, listening as he tells the story of the hunt, but their eyes keep drifting to the scar itself. It shines faintly in the firelight, freshly healed. That scar is not just skin, it is evidence. He met danger face to face and survived. It becomes part of his allure, a prehistoric tattoo carved by nature itself. While today people might get inked with swirling patterns or symbolic designs, back then, the skin bore its art through accidents, encounters, and battles. For many, scars would have been attractive in ways we might not think about today. They suggested bravery. They meant someone had gone out into the world and tested themselves. A scar on the arm might mean they stood close enough to the kill to be clawed or gored. A scar on the leg might mean they had run, stumbled, fallen, and still come back. In a society where survival was the ultimate measure of worth, those marks were beautiful in their own way. They were the rough equivalent of a medal pinned to a soldier's chest or a trophy on a shelf. Except you couldn't take them off. They followed you everywhere. And there was another layer too. Scars weren't just proof of bravery. They were proof of healing. Every scar said, "Yes, I was injured, but my body is strong enough to mend." That was a kind of reassurance. Imagine a young woman watching a man whose skin bore the record of wounds, now closed, now strong. She might see not just the danger he had faced, but the resilience he had shown. He healed. He endured. He is strong. The same was true in reverse, of course. A scarred woman carried proof of endurance through childbirth, through gathering journeys, through dangers met on the path. Each line on the body whispered of survival. Of course, not all scars were admired. A mark that hinted at weakness, at clumsiness, might draw laughter. You can almost hear the jokes around the fire. Oh yes, that scar. He tripped over a root running from a rabbit. Laughter would echo, and the scar would become a story, a cautionary tale, rather than a badge of honor. Humor softened the edges of life then, just as it does now. But still, even those scars, even the silly ones, mattered. They were remembered, retold, turned into lessons or laughter. The skin carried the memory long after the pain had gone. Some scars might even have been deliberately displayed. Imagine someone pushing back their furs, just slightly, so that the firelight caught the long line of a healed wound. No words were needed. The message was clear. I faced death, and I am still here. And that, in the logic of prehistoric attraction, was perhaps the most desirable quality of all. It's soothing to think of how universal this island. Across all times, humans have marked their bodies, whether intentionally or by accident. Tattoos, piercings, scarification rituals, all these came later, but they were rooted in something deeper, something ancient. Our ancestors understood the skin as a canvas. The stories written there, by tooth and claw, by fire and fall, became part of identity, and whether admired or laughed at, those marks turned pain into meaning, survival into beauty. So as you drift deeper into sleep, imagine a world where every scar was noticed, where each line on the skin was another chapter of a story that needed no words. And remember that the body you inhabit, with its marks and memories, is part of that same ancient tradition. Now breathe deeper and let the fire burn a little lower, because we are moving from sight to smell, from the scars that can be seen to the scents that drift invisibly through the air. In the modern world, we cover ourselves in perfumes, shampoos, deodorants, all designed to mask or modify our natural smell. But in prehistoric times, the human scent was a potent mixture of smoke, sweat, grease, and earth. And strangely enough, that was alluring. Picture a group sitting close around a fire, the smoke weaving its way into their hair, their clothes, their very skin. That smoky scent wasn't unpleasant. It was comforting. It meant warmth, safety, protection from the dark. To smell like smoke was to smell like the hearth, like the heart of the community. It meant you belonged. It was the prehistoric version of smelling like home. And then there was mammoth grease, or the fat of whatever animals were hunted and butchered. Hunters used it to coat tools, to waterproof skins, sometimes even to rub into their own bodies as protection against the cold. The result was a scent both earthy and musky, heavy and unmistakable. To us, it might sound dreadful, but to them, it was the perfume of survival. It meant this person had hunted, had access to meat, had contributed to the group's life. Imagine leaning close to someone and catching that faint, greasy aroma. It might not make you swoon in 21st century terms, but in their logic, it was irresistible. It was the smell of competence, of strength, of someone who would keep you alive through the winter. Even sweat had a place. Sweat was the mark of effort, of energy spent on behalf of the group. It mingled with smoke and grease, creating a bouquet that was anything but subtle. Yet, just as today, we recognize the smell of someone we love, so too did they. Familiar scents became comforting, reassuring. The stranger might smell odd, unfamiliar, unsettling, but the scent of your own people, their smoke, their grease, their sweat, was the scent of belonging. There's something funny about this, of course. Imagine a prehistoric flirtation, not a coy smile or a clever line, but leaning in just enough for someone to get a good whiff of your mammoth, fat perfume. Ah, yes, they might think. This one reeks of survival. Very attractive. Or picture someone returning from the hunt, drenched in sweat and smoke, greeted not with disgust but with admiration. Their scent told the story of the day, before they even spoke. Over time, these smells became part of ritual too. Smoke carried into hair and skin during ceremonies. Fat rubbed into the body as both protection and display. Smell was as much a marker as sight, perhaps even more powerful, because it clung invisibly, carried on the air, remembered long after words were forgotten. As you sink deeper into rest, think about how different their world was, how scents we might wrinkle our noses at today were then signs of value, signals of strength, markers of beauty. Smoke was warmth. Grease was sustenance. Sweat was energy. Together, they formed the invisible halo that surrounded each person, a halo that could draw others closer. So breathe slowly now, and let the ancient world settle in your imagination. A world of scars, lit by firelight, and scents carried on the night air. A world where survival wrote itself on the skin and floated through the senses. A world where beauty was not an illusion created by filters or fashion, but a direct reflection of life, lived and endured. And in that world, you too would have been noticed for your scars, for your scent, for the marks of a life that meant something. Imagine a world without Sephora, without glittering bottles lined up in bathroom cabinets, without influencers posting their 10-step skincare routines. Strip away the powders, the pencils, the palettes, and you still find the same desire that has always lived in humans. The longing to decorate, to enhance, to transform the face and body into something just a little more striking, a little more noticeable. In the deep past, when mirrors were little more than a reflection in a stream, people still found ways to play with color and texture, and their tools came not from laboratories, but from the earth itself. Ash, clay, berry juice. This was the original cosmetic kit. Primitive by modern standards, yes, but also ingenious, and it carried a power we still recognize today. Close your eyes and picture it. A woman, squatting near a fire, scooping a pinch of ash between her fingers. She smears it across her cheeks, darkening them, creating shadows that turn her face into something more dramatic in the flickering firelight. It is not just decoration. It might be protection, a way to shield her skin from the sun, or perhaps a ritual, a signal to her tribe that she is ready for the dance, for the hunt, or even for courtship. Across from her, another figure crushes berries in a hollowed-out stone, staining fingers deep red. He lifts the juice to his lips, smearing them with color. Suddenly, his mouth is vivid, almost glowing in the dim light. It catches the eye. It makes people notice. Without realizing it, he has invented lipstick. Ash was everywhere, and so it became a versatile medium. It could blacken the skin, deepen the sockets of the eyes, sharpen the contrast of a face against pale dawn light. Warriors might have smeared it across their faces to appear more fearsome. Dancers might have dusted themselves with it to become otherworldly in ritual, and humor slips in here too. Imagine someone sneezing mid-application, sending ash flying everywhere. The tribe laughs. The tension breaks, and the face that was meant to look fierce now looks faintly ridiculous. Even then, makeup mishaps must have been common. The human desire to beautify always risks a touch of comedy. Clay offered something different. Its colors varied: red, white, yellow, depending on the soil. Red clay could become a kind of rouge, smeared on cheeks or rubbed into the body to give the impression of vitality and heat. White clay could lighten the skin, making the wearer appear ghostly or divine. There is something striking about that image. A group of people painted stark white, moving together in moonlight, their bodies glowing against the dark. The effect must have been eerie, unforgettable, almost magical, and clay also protected. It cooled the skin in hot climates, soothed insect bites, and acted as a kind of sunscreen. Practicality merged with beauty until the two were indistinguishable. To paint yourself with clay was both survival and art. And then the berries, those small jewels of color, scattered across forests and plains. They stained everything they touched, and early humans quickly realized they could stain themselves too. Red berries made lips and cheeks flush with color, mimicking the natural signals of health and fertility. A little berry juice could turn an ordinary face into one that looked vibrant, alive, desirable. The connection was immediate and instinctive. In a harsh world, signs of health were deeply attractive, and color on the face mimicked the bloom of vitality. But these proto-cosmetics were not only about beauty in the narrow sense. They were symbols, tools of communication. A smear of ash might mean mourning. A stripe of clay across the forehead might signal readiness for battle. Berry-stained lips might declare availability, or perhaps participation in ritual. Just as makeup today can be bold, subtle, or ceremonial, so too did early cosmetics carry multiple meanings. Each color, each smear of pigment, was part of a language written on the skin, and it's not hard to imagine the playfulness involved. Children copying their elders, smearing too much berry juice, and ending up looking like they had just eaten their weight in fruit. Friends painting each other for fun, or for practice, or for the sheer joy of transforming the ordinary into the extraordinary. The firelight catching on faces marked with clay and ash must have turned every gathering into a theater of shadows and color. So as you rest now, imagine that warmth, that creativity, that simple joy of taking what the earth gives and turning it into art. The desire to decorate ourselves is not shallow. It is ancient, born in caves and forests, passed down through millennia, whispering to us even now when we pick up a brush or a pencil. It is the same impulse, unchanged, still alive in the human spirit. Now let us move from the painted skin to the shape of the body itself, to one of the most obvious markers of difference among humans: height. In a world of constant danger and shifting environments, height and strength were not just matters of preference, but of survival. And yet, the way they were judged varied wildly between different groups. There was no single universal ideal. For some, tall hunters were the pinnacle of desirability, striding across the plains with long legs that ate up the ground. For others, compact survivors, smaller and sturdier, carried the promise of endurance, of less need for food, of agility in places where bulk could become a burden. Imagine the tension around a fire, the subtle glances cast as people compared themselves. The tall man stands, his head nearly brushing the low roof of the cave, his frame long and impressive. His height speaks of reach, of visibility, of dominance in the hunt. When he hurls a spear, It travels further. When he shouts across a plain, his voice carries. He is admired, desired, seen as someone who can lead. Yet on the same night, another figure sits quietly, shorter, stockier, compact. He eats less food, needs fewer resources, can slip through tight spaces in the forest, can climb rocks with ease. In a lean season, when every calorie matters, who is more attractive then? This is the politics of height and strength. They were not fixed values, but shifting ones, dependent on context. In tribes that roamed wide open spaces, tallness became an advantage, and therefore a beauty standard. In tribes that lived in mountainous regions or dense forests, smaller frames were celebrated because survival favored agility over reach. Beauty, then as now, was never universal. It was local, situational, pragmatic. Strength, too, was judged with nuance. Raw power mattered, of course. A strong back could carry wood, meat, even children. Muscles were the prehistoric equivalent of wealth. They showed investment in survival. But too much strength could become intimidating, even risky. A man so bulky, he consumed more than his share of food, might be less desirable when resources ran low. A woman so tall she required more calories might be admired in times of abundance, but pitied in famine. Preferences shifted constantly, adjusting to circumstance. And yet, despite the seriousness of these judgments, humor found its way in. Imagine jokes at the expense of the tall hunter who always hit his head on the cave roof, or laughter when the shorter survivor had to run twice as fast to keep up with longer legs. Even then, people teased, joked, played with the differences that marked them. Attraction always carried laughter alongside seriousness. Anthropologists studying bones have noted these variations. Different groups adapted to their environments, shaping their bodies over generations. Some lineages grew taller, others shorter. These differences weren't just random. They reflected survival strategies that became embedded in preference. People found attractive what helped their group endure. So as you drift towards sleep, imagine those contrasts, those shifting ideals. A tall figure striding across the plains, admired for his reach. A compact figure darting through the forest, admired for her endurance. Each beautiful in their own way, each carrying the promise of survival. In the end, height and strength were not about vanity. They were about the deep, ancient instinct to find in each other the qualities that could carry the group through another winter, another hunt, another day, and maybe there is comfort in that. Beauty has always been about survival, about the traits that make us resilient. Whether tall or short, strong or compact, painted with clay or scarred with life, humans have always found ways to admire one another, to desire one another, to laugh and to love in the flickering firelight. When you close your eyes and imagine a prehistoric face, what do you see? Maybe a broad brow, maybe a strong jaw, maybe teeth not quite as straight as the ones you'd see on a toothpaste ad today. But even without orthodontics or cosmetic surgery, even without magazines or Instagram filters, our ancestors still noticed something we obsess over in the modern world: symmetry, the subtle balance of left and right, the harmony of features that match. It might seem surprising to think that long before math and geometry were written down, human beings were already judging each other through this invisible ruler. And yet, they were. Symmetry was a language of health, a whisper of good genes, a silent signal that someone's body had developed without obvious glitches. Imagine sitting by the fire in a dimly lit cave. Across from you, someone's face catches your attention. The firelight shifts and shadows stretch, but what holds your gaze isn't just the glow, it's the balance. The curve of one cheek matches the other. The eyes are level, the nose straight. Something about it just feels right, comforting, appealing. Now look again at someone else, whose face is less aligned. One eye sits slightly higher, the jaw angles differently from side to side. There's nothing wrong with them, but the feeling is different. You don't analyze it consciously, you don't have the words for it, but your brain registers it. Symmetry makes a difference. This instinct wasn't born out of vanity. In a harsh and dangerous world, symmetry signaled stability. It suggested that someone's body had grown strong despite disease, malnutrition, or injury. A symmetrical face was like a flag planted on the battlefield of survival, declaring victory. And so, whether they knew it or not, early humans leaned toward those balanced faces when choosing mates. It wasn't about being picky, it was about hedging bets for the future. Symmetry was biology's way of saying, this one has weathered storms and might give your children the best chance. Of course, let's not imagine everyone sitting around measuring jaw lines with sticks. Attraction was instinctual, not mathematical, and like today, people probably made jokes about it too. Picture someone with a lopsided grin being teased by their friends, or a hunter making a dramatic face to exaggerate his uneven features for a laugh. Humor softened the edge of these silent judgments. After all, nobody chose their face, and life was too short to sulk over cheekbones. But the fascination with symmetry left its traces. Archaeologists studying carved figurines and ancient art notice that many of these images strive for balance. Even in the earliest attempts at sculpture, faces are made with even eyes, even noses, even proportions. Was this deliberate? Or was it simply that symmetry looked right, even to artists of the Ice Age? Whatever the answer, the pattern repeats across cultures and millennia. Humans were wired to find balance beautiful. And yet, perfection wasn't everything. Sometimes, asymmetry carried its own appeal. A scar across one cheek, a crooked grin, these things told stories. They added character, hinted at bravery, at survival, at individuality. Perhaps one person admired a symmetrical face for its health, while another admired a slightly uneven one for its uniqueness. Preference was never uniform. It shifted, flexed, and bent with personality, humor, and circumstance. Think of it this way. Symmetry was the safe bet, the reliable choice. Asymmetry was the wild card, the surprise. Some people have always loved a little unpredictability, and that, too, is deeply human. So as you let yourself rest, imagine that quiet prehistoric world where faces glowed in firelight, judged not with rulers or filters, but with instincts as old as time. And know that the same instinct lingers in you, whispering softly every time you look into someone's eyes. Now shift your focus from faces to sounds. If eyes and features told stories in silence, then voices filled the night with expression. Long before microphones or auto-tune, before karaoke machines and playlists, human beings used their voices to charm, to warn, to attract, to amuse. And what mattered wasn't just what was said, but how it sounded. The timbre, the tone, the rhythm, all of these carried meaning, and some were considered downright irresistible. Deep voices, booming laughs, even strange singing contests around fires. This was the prehistoric playlist. Picture it. The tribe gathers after a long day of hunting or foraging. The fire is roaring, the night pressing in close. Out of the darkness comes a deep voice, rumbling like distant thunder. It belongs to a tall hunter, his chest wide, his lungs strong. Instantly, the group feels safer. A deep voice promised strength, protection, power. It resonated not just in the ears but in the chest, vibrating through bones and stirring something instinctual. Attraction grew from that resonance. For women, a deep-voiced partner meant security, someone who could guard the fire. For men, that same sound might command respect, leadership, or even envy. But it wasn't only depth that mattered. Loudness carried weight too. A laugh that burst forth and rolled across the group was a magnet, drawing attention, easing tension. People with big, contagious laughs must have been adored. They transformed silence into joy, soothed fears, pulled people together. Imagine a long, hungry winter night where food was scarce. Morale would sink. But then someone with a huge laugh cracked a joke, and suddenly the whole group was giggling, their bellies aching from mirth. That person wasn't just funny, they were valuable. Their voice lifted spirits, and in a world that demanded constant endurance, that was as vital as food. And then there was singing. Not the polished performances of today, but raw, strange, haunting sounds. People probably sang to mimic animals, to call to spirits, to soothe children. They sang in groups, voices weaving together in ways that must have sounded both eerie and enchanting. And sometimes they competed. Who could sing the loudest? Who could sing the longest without stopping? Who could mimic the howl of a wolf or the cry of a bird most convincingly? These competitions weren't just entertainment. They were auditions, courtship displays, demonstrations of stamina and creativity. Imagine a young man croaking out a long, strange note, holding it until his face turned red, just to impress someone across the fire. Imagine a young woman answering back with her own song, higher, wilder, laughing as she outlasted him. The fire became their stage, the night their audience. Humor lived here too. Singing badly must have been just as funny then as it is now. Someone's voice cracked, someone missed a rhythm, and the tribe roared with laughter. That laughter, though, was not cruel. It was bonding. Even failure became part of the story, part of the entertainment, part of the charm. Sometimes, being brave enough to sing badly was just as attractive as singing well. Over time, voices built reputations. A deep-voiced man might be sought out as a leader. A woman with a soothing lullaby might be trusted with children. A person with a huge, infectious laugh might be the heart of every gathering. Voice was identity. It was power. It was beauty. Think about how deeply this instinct still runs in us. Today, people still swoon over deep voices, still adore hearty laughs, still find themselves enchanted by music, even if no words are spoken. The vibrations go straight to the nervous system, bypassing logic, making us feel before we think. This is ancient, carved into us by generations who lived and died by firelight. So, as you drift now into deeper sleep, imagine yourself there. The crackle of wood, the hush of the night, the air filled with voices, some deep and commanding, some light and playful, some bursting with laughter, some weaving together in eerie songs. It is a chorus of humanity at its most raw, its most honest. And whether you laughed, or swooned, or sang along, those voices carried you, lifted you, and made the night less frightening. That was their magic, their beauty, their power. And it still echoes now, in every laugh you share, every song you hum, every voice that makes your heart stir. Imagine yourself sitting in the glow of a fire, surrounded by the hum of a prehistoric camp at night. People are laughing, sharing food. The flames are popping, and shadows crawl across the walls of the cave. Everyone is wrapped in animal hides, faces marked with ash or clay, hair either wild or woven into crude braids. At first glance, the world seems stripped bare of ornament, all raw survival and necessity. But look closer, and you'll notice that even here, even in a world of spears and mammoth hunts, people craved decoration. They craved accessories. They craved the ability to take something from the environment and turn it into a signal, a story, a statement. And sometimes, those statements were made with shells, with bones, even with the teeth of creatures that might have been trying to kill them just a week earlier. It's tempting to think of jewelry as frivolous, something only possible in comfortable societies with free time. But archaeologists find evidence of adornment going back tens of thousands of years. Tiny beads carved from shells, strung into necklaces or sewn into clothing. Bones and teeth polished and drilled, dangling from cords of sinew. Even claws, feathers, and chunks of amber or stone. These were not random choices. They carried meaning. They declared status, strength, courage, or connection to the spirit world. Take shell necklaces. In many regions, the ocean was far away, and to possess a shell was proof of travel or trade. Wearing a string of them was like flashing a badge that said, "I have connections. I belong to a network larger than this cave." Imagine how impressive that would look under firelight. Pale shells gleaming against dark skin, rattling faintly as the wearer moved. They weren't just jewelry. They were portable announcements of belonging, of reach, of wealth, in a world where wealth wasn't coins, but connections. Then there were bones and teeth. A necklace of animal teeth wasn't just an accessory, it was evidence. You didn't buy it in a market. You earned it by being part of the hunt, by standing close enough to danger to claim the prize. Every fang dangling from a cord around someone's neck whispered, "I was there when this beast fell. I survived. I am marked by it." In that sense, bone jewelry was the original resume. It told your story without a word. And yes, it was a flex, a prehistoric brag. Imagine two hunters sitting side by side. One has a bare chest, nothing but scars. The other has a necklace strung with wolf teeth, rattling softly as he leans back. Who are you looking at? Who seems more impressive, more dangerous, more desirable? That necklace isn't just decoration. It's attraction, power, maybe even intimidation. It says, "Choose me. I've proven myself." And then, of course, there's the sheer humor of it. Picture a young person trying to make a necklace for the first time, fumbling with sinew cords, accidentally poking themselves, only to show up with a lopsided string of random bones that clack together every time they move. Everyone laughs, but they admire it too, because effort itself was part of the signal. Even awkward jewelry told the group, this person values meaning, values expression, values being noticed. Piercings likely existed too. Holes in ears, in lips, in noses, marked with sharpened bones or small bits of stone. Painful, yes, but that pain itself was a declaration. I can endure this. I can transform myself. I can carry beauty and bravery together. Even the act of piercing was a ritual, a way of binding people through shared experience. You can almost imagine a group gathered around as someone drives a sharpened thorn through skin, everyone wincing together, then cheering as the ornament is put in place. The body became the canvas, and courage, the ink. But why adorn at all, when life was so precarious? Because accessories were never just about looks. They were about communication. They told people who you were, what you had done, where you belonged. They helped people choose mates, decide leaders, forge friendships. They were social glue, woven from sinew and stone. And at night, as the firelight danced across teeth and shells and bones, those glimmers weren't just pretty, they were mesmerizing. They whispered of danger, of survival, of connection, of meaning. So, as you drift towards sleep, imagine yourself wearing such things. A necklace of shells clattering softly, bone beads clicking together, a piercing catching the glow of firelight. You are decorated not with gold or silver, but with the memory of hunts and the gifts of the earth. And everyone who looks at you knows who you are, not because you said it, but because you wear it. Now picture the same prehistoric camp, but this time, you're not noticing jewelry or adornment. You're noticing the way people move. Gait and posture might seem subtle, but to our ancestors, they were flashing neon signs of survival, strength, and desirability. The way someone carried themselves revealed everything: health, confidence, stamina, readiness. Walking was more than transportation. It was performance. Think of a tall hunter striding across the plain. Each step is long, sure, unhurried. His back is straight, his shoulders broad, the rhythm of his gait steady and strong. People watch him approach, and without needing words, they feel reassured. This is someone who can cover ground, who can chase, who can endure. His very walk is a declaration. I am capable. I am safe to follow. Now imagine another figure, shorter, more compact. Their steps are quicker, lighter, darting across uneven ground with ease. They don't cover as much distance with each stride, but they maneuver through rocks, twist around obstacles, climb trees with agility. Their gait is nimble, efficient. For a tribe that lives in forests or mountains, that style of movement is beautiful, even essential. Compact survivors didn't need to tower. They needed to endure and adapt. Their walk told a story of energy conservation, of resilience, of slipping through the cracks where others stumbled. Posture mattered too. Someone who slumped, who shuffled, who dragged their feet, looked tired, weak, unwell. In a world where illness could mean death for an entire group, that was a warning sign. But someone who walked upright, chest open, head lifted, they radiated health. Even if they were no stronger than anyone else, that posture told the brain, this person is thriving. They became more attractive, not because of raw muscle, but because of how they presented themselves. And humor finds its way in here as well. Imagine someone strutting too much, exaggerating their movements until they look like a parody of strength. The tribe would laugh, teasing them for showing off. Or picture someone tripping mid-stride, stumbling over a rock, trying to recover their dignity, while everyone around the fire roared with amusement. Even then, humans noticed the fine line between confidence and arrogance, between smoothness and clumsiness. The walk was a stage, and the audience was merciless. But when done right, the gait was powerful. It was hypnotic. Watching someone move with purpose, with steadiness, must have been one of the earliest forms of attraction. The sway of hips, the rhythm of steps, the control of balance, it all signaled underlying qualities that mattered deeply for survival. A good walker could hunt, could travel, could escape danger, could migrate with the group. A bad walker slowed everyone down, became a liability. No wonder posture and stride became silent standards of beauty. Even today, echoes remain. We still notice when someone carries themselves with confidence. We still respond to upright posture, steady rhythm, graceful movement. These instincts are ancient, carved into our bones by generations who judged each other, not by clothes or jewelry, but by the way they crossed a clearing. So as you let yourself relax deeper, imagine yourself walking across that clearing. Each step steady, your body upright, your posture open. Others watch, and they see not just your shape, but your strength, your resilience, your readiness. The way you move is the way you speak without words. And in that quiet prehistoric world, it was enough to draw eyes, to win admiration, even to secure love. The walking aesthetic was not about style, it was about life. And even as you lie still now, you carry that instinct within you, passed down from countless ancestors who knew how much a stride could say. There is something timeless about firelight. Even now, when most of us have electric bulbs at the flick of a switch, you know the feeling. A campfire on a chilly night, a candle flickering on a table, the glow of light that doesn't just illuminate, but softens, flatters, and transforms. Now imagine the first people to sit around fire pits, tens of thousands of years ago. They had no candles, no chandeliers, no strings of fairy lights to make a mood. What they had was flame, alive and unpredictable, painting their faces with shadows and gold. The effect was nothing short of magic, and it shaped the way people saw one another, the way they bonded, the way they fell in love. You could say candlelight dinners began right there, with literal fire pits. Picture it clearly. The day has been long, filled with hunting, gathering, carrying water, scraping hides. The sun has set, plunging the world into a darkness so complete it feels like velvet. In the black, your eyes strain, searching for shapes, for threats, for comfort. Then someone sparks a fire, and suddenly the night blooms with warmth. The flames dance, the smoke rises, and faces appear out of the void. But not as they looked in daylight. No, firelight changes everything. It smooths out roughness, deepens the eyes, gives every skin a golden sheen. Wrinkles fade, scars soften, cheekbones sharpen, and eyes gleam with reflections of flame. If you've ever wondered why humans are drawn to staring into fires, it may be because, for thousands of years, that glow was how we fell for each other. Think of two people sitting opposite each other, both exhausted from a long trek. In daylight, they look haggard, covered in dirt, their hair tangled. But under the fire glow, they are transformed. One's eyes sparkle like jewels, their face calm and striking. The other's laughter rings louder, their smile catching the light. Suddenly, attraction flickers to life. It's not makeup or fancy clothes. It's the physics of firelight, flattering angles, hiding blemishes, highlighting what is most expressive in a face. In that moment, beauty becomes magnified. And there's humor in this, too. Imagine someone developing a crush during one of these firelit evenings, only to be startled the next morning when they see the same person in the harsh glare of the Sunday. The smoldering, mysterious figure from last night is just a tired hunter with crooked teeth and hair that smells faintly of smoke. Firelight romance had its risks, but maybe that was part of the fun. But the fireglow effect was not just about looks, it was about mood, about intimacy. Flames brought people together, literally close enough to share warmth, to pass food, to whisper. Around the fire, people told stories, sang songs, planned hunts, mourned the dead, laughed until their stomachs hurt. The glow didn't just soften faces, it softened the spirit. Conflicts melted, fears eased, bonds deepened. Firelight was community. Firelight was safety. And firelight was, in its way, romantic. Scientists today know that firelight changes how the brain works. It slows heart rates, relaxes the mind, encourages social connection. For our ancestors, who lived in a world of constant danger, this effect would have been profound. Sitting in the glow wasn't just pleasant, it was healing, it was necessary. And so fire became more than a tool. It became an atmosphere, a stage on which the drama of attraction and companionship played out. As you let your breathing slow, imagine yourself sitting there. The fire is warm, the shadows flicker across faces, laughter rises and falls like waves. You glance across the circle, and someone glances back, their eyes glowing in the light. For a moment, the world is small, safe, golden. That is the fire glow effect. It was the first candlelight dinner, the first mood lighting, the first spark of romance in a world that had no electricity, but plenty of flame. Now imagine the seasons turning. Unlike our climate-controlled lives, where air conditioning and central heating smooth out the extremes, our ancestors lived directly under the power of the weather. Summer meant heat, buzzing insects. Long days of Sunday winter meant freezing nights, hunger and breath visible in the air. Beauty, in that world, was never fixed. It shifted with the seasons, with the needs of survival. Someone who looked perfect in July might look like a liability in January. Someone who shone in the cold might wilt in the heat. Seasonal beauty standards were as real then as fashion trends are now, except they weren't about fabric or color. They were about survival. In summer, thinness might be admired. Food was easier to find. Plants grew wild. Animals were abundant. A lean figure suggested agility, speed, the ability to chase, climb, and endure long hunts under the sunday. Sweat slicked the skin, muscles stood out, and energy seemed endless. People who moved lightly were attractive because they could travel further, gather more, keep pace with the shifting herds. A compact, wiry body seemed perfect for the season. In warm nights, under starlight, those figures would dance, leap, and run with an energy that was beautiful to watch. But come winter, when food grew scarce and the world turned white, the ideal changed overnight. Suddenly, plumpness was prized. A soft body promised survival through the lean months. Round cheeks meant calories stored, hips padded with the energy to endure. Those who had gained weight in summer were admired now, their bodies seen as reservoirs of life. A skinny figure was no longer elegant. It was alarming. It suggested starvation, weakness, fragility. Winter romance leaned toward the warmest partners, the ones who could share body heat, who would last until spring. Imagine the conversations. In summer, people whispering about who was fast, who could climb the highest tree, who could bring back the biggest catch. In winter, the whispers changed. Who looked the healthiest, who still had a glow to their skin, who wasn't wasting away. Beauty standards weren't arbitrary. They shifted because survival shifted. What was desirable was whatever promised life. And yes, it's funny to picture someone admired in summer for their wiry frame, only to be teased in winter for being too bony. Or the opposite. Someone overlooked during the hot months, suddenly becoming the star of attention when the snow fell. Prehistoric dating was seasonal. You might be hot in June and overlooked by December, or vice versa. Everyone got their turn, in a sense. These seasonal shifts weren't just about body size, though. Skin tone changed with the seasons, too. In summer, sun-darkened skin might have looked healthy, proof of days spent gathering and hunting. In winter, paler skin might have been associated with endurance indoors, with conserving energy. Even hair changed its role. In summer, long hair could be a nuisance, sticking to sweaty skin. In winter, it became insulation, admired as protection. The rhythms of the seasons left deep marks on human behavior. Songs, rituals, even myths reflected the cycle of plenty and scarcity, heat and cold. And beauty moved with those rhythms, fluid and flexible. Just as we still change our clothing, our diets, our routines with the seasons, theirs was just more extreme, because survival depended on it. So as you rest now, imagine lying in a cave in winter, your body pressed against others, for warmth, admiring those whose fullness promises safety. Then imagine the same place in summer, when the fire burns lower, and the lean, agile bodies leap in dances under starlight. Beauty is never still. It bends with the seasons, with the needs of survival, with the turning of the earth itself. And knowing that, perhaps you can feel a little closer to those ancestors who, like us, laughed, admired, desired, and changed with the seasons of life. Picture a cold plain, the wind cutting across grass that bends like waves under the grey sky. A group of hunters move in a line, spears balanced, eyes sharp. They are tired, hungry, their muscles aching after days of tracking a herd that always seems just beyond reach. And yet, in the midst of all this danger and difficulty, someone cracks a joke. Maybe it's about how clumsy one of them was yesterday when they tripped over a root. Or maybe it's about how if they don't catch something soon, they'll all be chewing on bark, like rabbits. The others laugh, their shoulders shaking, breath steaming in the cold. And in that moment, the weight of survival lifts. They feel lighter, closer, more alive. That is the power of humor. And in the world of our ancestors, it was as attractive, sometimes even more attractive, than muscles. Humor in the hunt wasn't just entertainment. It was survival. In a world where fear and hunger could hollow out the spirit, laughter filled it again. The person who could make others laugh was invaluable. They could keep the group steady when morale faltered, could distract from hunger pangs, could turn a dangerous trek into something that felt almost manageable, and people noticed. That kind of power was magnetic. It didn't matter if someone had the biggest biceps if they couldn't make anyone smile. Muscles might kill the mammoth, but jokes made the waiting bearable. Imagine sitting by the fire. After a long day, the food is cooking slowly, the smell of fat sizzling in the flames. The hunters recount what happened, and one of them begins to embellish. The story of the near miss with the charging bison becomes more dramatic, exaggerated hand gestures making the children gasp and the adults laugh. Soon, he's adding in ridiculous details, how the bison looked him straight in the eye and winked, how his spear slipped because the spirits decided to play a prank. The circle erupts with laughter, and everyone goes to sleep with lighter hearts. That man may not be the strongest, but his storytelling makes him glow in the eyes of the tribe. He has turned fear into joy, and that is irresistible. Humor was also a signal of intelligence. To make people laugh, you had to observe, to twist reality just enough, to play with timing and voice. It showed quick thinking, creativity, and awareness, all traits that were valuable in a world of constant uncertainty. Choosing a partner who could joke and tell stories wasn't just about fun. It was about survival. It meant you had someone who could stay calm under stress, who could find solutions, who could bring light, even in the darkest winter. And humor created bonds. Shared laughter made people feel closer, made them trust each other more deeply. Two people laughing together during a hunt might later find themselves sitting closer at the fire, glancing at each other, feeling the spark of attraction. In that way, laughter was courtship, soft and subtle, but as real as the most daring displays of strength. Muscles impressed, jokes charmed, storytelling seduced. And sometimes, the person who had all three strength, humor, and words was unstoppable. It's easy to picture how this might play out. The tribe is hungry. A young hunter stands to boast about his kill, flexing his muscles. People nod politely. Then another hunter stands, reenacting the kill with exaggerated movements, tripping over his own feet, mimicking the animal's expressions. The group roars with laughter, and suddenly, he is the one everyone remembers, the one eyes linger on. Humor has stolen the spotlight. Even today, that instinct runs deep. People still fall for those who make them laugh. They still feel drawn to storytellers, to the ones who lighten heavy days. It is an ancient inheritance, passed down from fire pits and hunting grounds. Our ancestors knew, long before we did, that a laugh could be as nourishing as food, as strengthening as muscles, and as attractive as the strongest jawline. So as you sink into rest, remember this. Long before stand-up comedy, long before romantic comedies, humor in the hunt was already stealing hearts. Now, imagine moving across continents, across climates, across landscapes, so different, they might as well be separate worlds. From the icy winds of Europe to the golden savannas of Africa, to the thick forests and vast steppes of Asia, humans adapted in countless ways. And with adaptation came taste. What one group found irresistible might have looked strange to another. There was no universal definition of beauty. Attraction was regional, molded by the environment, by survival needs, by the stories each culture told itself about what was valuable. In Europe during the Ice Age, the cold ruled everything. To survive meant to endure endless winters, to hunt massive animals, to huddle in caves against the storms. Beauty here leaned towards strength and sturdiness. Wide hips promised warmth and fertility. Strong arms meant someone could haul wood, drag meat, carry children through snow. Pale skin may have been admired simply because it was common, or because it reflected the harsh light of winter fires. In those caves, figures carved into ivory and stone show plump bodies, rounded bellies, exaggerated forms. The Venus figurines were ideals in a land where fat meant survival. To a European Ice Age eye, that was beauty. Cross into Africa, and the standards shift with the Sunday. Here, the environment demanded agility, endurance, speed. Leaner bodies thrived in the heat, moving quickly across open land, chasing animals that ran fast and far. Dark, sun-burnished skin wasn't just healthy, it was beautiful, radiant, glowing with life. Symmetry shone brightly here, faces balanced and smooth under endless skies. Jewelry made of shells, bright and rare, sparkled against darker skin, catching attention in dances and rituals. To Africans of prehistory, beauty was movement, shine, energy. And then to Asia, with its staggering diversity. In the steppes, cold and wide, sturdiness mattered again. But in the forests, smaller frames may have been admired for agility. Asian groups experimented with adornments, beads and stones, tattoos and paint. The Neanderthal cousins, who ranged into these lands, carried their own ideals. heavy-browed and strong, admired in their way. And as modern humans spread into these regions, they brought different preferences, sometimes blending, sometimes clashing. In some areas, tallness was prized. In others, compactness was better. The environment dictated what made sense, but it wasn't just practicality. Even then, people sought novelty. A shell from a faraway coast, a feather from a bird not usually seen, a skin tone slightly different from the local norm. These things carried allure. Exoticism is not modern. It is ancient. People found beauty in the unusual, in the rare, in what whispered of another world. Attraction wasn't just survival, it was curiosity. Humor creeps in here too, because you can imagine the culture shock. A group from the north, traveling south, suddenly surrounded by people, leaner, darker, faster. Whispers pass around the fire. Do they ever get cold? How do they run like that? Look how shiny their skin island. And in reverse, southerners seeing northerners for the first time. Why are they so pale? Do they ever eat? Look at those heavy clothes, ridiculous in this heat. The first cross-cultural encounters must have been full of fascination, confusion, and yes, attraction. Regional differences in beauty were the earliest fashion trends. They shifted with weather, with resources, with migration. There was no one perfect look, only many, each molded by the land itself. And when groups met, those standards sometimes blended, creating new ideals. That is how humanity grew, how attraction shaped not just couples, but entire populations. As you drift deeper into rest, imagine these worlds, the icy caves of Europe, where rounded figures were cherished, the golden savannas of Africa, where agility and shine were admired, the varied landscapes of Asia, where sturdiness and adornment carried meaning. Beauty was not a single story. It was many stories, told across continents, each one whispering, survive here, thrive here, love here. And those whispers echo still. Our preferences, our diversity, our fascination with difference, they all began long ago, when humans spread across the earth and shaped their ideals to fit the land. There is something soothing in that thought. Wherever you are, whatever you look like, you are part of that story, a continuation of tastes shaped by wind and sun and survival itself. The story of human beauty is the story of a cosmic joke, one played out slowly, across hundreds of thousands of years. So slowly that no one laughing around a fire or flirting during a hunt could ever realize they were the punchline. Our ancestors judged each other with eyes sharpened by survival. Who looked strong, who looked plump enough to endure a famine, who smelled like fire and grease instead of disease, who walked tall, who laughed loudly, who decorated themselves with shells or paint. Each preference was small in the moment. A fleeting glance, a smile, held a little longer than usual. But add those glances together, generation after generation, and suddenly the very shape of humanity changes. Imagine two people in the Ice Age. One has a high, round forehead, the other a heavy brow ridge. The one with the smooth forehead gets chosen, again and again, because it signals intelligence, or because the firelight makes their eyes gleam more brightly, or simply because someone found it appealing. A few hundred years later, children of that line inherit the forehead, and they too are chosen more often. Slowly, imperceptibly, humanity shifts. By the time you look in the mirror today, the shape of your own head is the result of those ancient, quiet decisions. You didn't vote for your skull, but your ancestors did. Every time, they glanced across a fire and thought, yes, that one. The evolutionary joke is that we think of beauty as cultural, as shallow, as a matter of taste. But taste, when repeated endlessly, becomes evolution. People who admired plumpness passed on genes that stored fat efficiently. People who admired symmetry passed on immune systems that resisted disease. People who admired laughter passed on brains wired for creativity. None of them were thinking about the future of the species. They were just trying to choose partners who looked good, smelled good, or made them laugh. Yet, here we are, shaped by their whims, walking punchlines to a joke that began in caves. And the joke continues. Think of hair. Some people adored thick, shaggy fur in cold regions, cuddling up like human bears. Others prized smooth, shiny skin in hot places. Over thousands of years, the genes for less hair spread, leaving us as the nearly naked apes we are today. We still argue about body hair in magazines, in salons, in whispered gossip. But the truth is, our ancestors already voted with their desire. They wanted smoother partners. And now most of us barely grow a fraction of the fur our bodies once carried. Imagine how confused a Neanderthal would be if they saw us now hairless, hair products lined up on shelves, and still complaining. The joke is that we're stuck with the choices of people who lived and died before writing even existed. Or, consider voice. Deep tones were admired, booming laughs were irresistible. So people with strong voices and hearty laughs tended to find partners, tended to have children, tended to pass on lungs and throats capable of producing those sounds. Over generations, voices became markers not just of attraction, but of lineage. You laugh at a friend's joke, the sound rolling out of you, and that sound is a fossil. It's the echo of laughter that once reassured hungry hunters that the world wasn't as grim as it seemed. You're laughing because your ancestors laughed, and they passed on the ability because someone thought a big laugh was sexy. That is the evolutionary joke. Even scars and smells play their part. The person who admired the hunter with the wolf bite scar passed on a taste for bravery, so future generations didn't just heal wounds, but flaunted them. The person who admired the scent of mammoth grease passed on a brain wired to associate smell with safety, comfort, attraction. And now we live in a world of perfumes and colognes, still trying to capture that same allure in a bottle. Eau de mammoth grease never made it onto a department store shelf, but the instinct behind Chanel or Dior is the same. Smell shapes desire, desire shapes survival, survival shapes the species. The joke is that we buy luxury scents while carrying genes that once found smoke and fat irresistible. Symmetry is perhaps the sharpest part of the humor. Your ancestors preferred faces that lined up neatly because it meant stability in growth, fewer diseases, stronger children. And so, over time, symmetrical faces became more common, but complete perfection never existed. The world is full of small asymmetries, and those quirks, too, survived because someone loved them. Maybe the uneven smile, maybe the crooked nose, maybe the scar. So today, even while scientists can measure symmetry as a marker of health, you might fall in love with someone for the exact feature that breaks it. That's the irony. The joke is that we're drawn to balance, but also to the flaws that tilt it. Both instincts survived, so both are etched into us. The greatest joke of all is that there's no escape. You can rebel against beauty standards. You can refuse to follow trends. You can insist that you don't care. But deep down, the whispers of those ancient choices still guide you. You're not attracted to symmetry because a magazine told you to be. You're attracted because 10,000 generations ago, someone sitting by a fire thought the same thing and passed the preference on. You're not calmed by laughter just because you like humor. You're calmed because laughter once meant survival. The joke is not that beauty standards exist. The joke is that we carry them, whether we want to or not. And yet, this isn't a cruel joke. It's a gentle one, cosmic and slow, shaping us into who we are. Every feature of your face, every sound of your voice, every curve of your body is the result of choices made by people who never knew you'd exist. They lived, they judged, they loved, they survived, and now you are here, carrying the punchline. If you smile at that thought, then the joke has landed. And perhaps, as you drift deeper towards sleep, you can appreciate the absurdity of it. Evolution shaped by desire, desire shaped by survival, survival shaped by quirks and preferences. A chain of choices stretching back to firelight, shaping the way your face looks in a mirror today. And now we come to the gentle ending, the closing chill down, the place where you let go of all the weight of survival, of judgment, of standards that stretch back into the dark. Because in truth, all beauty standards are ridiculous. They always have been. Imagine the absurdity of people freezing in caves, hungry and exhausted, still finding the energy to gossip about who had the best walk or who smelled nicest after rolling in mammoth grease. Imagine people risking their lives in hunts, then giggling about who had the funniest laugh or who looked better with clay smeared on their face. It's laughable, and yet it's deeply human. Even now, the same silliness plays out. One culture prizes thinness, another celebrates curves. One decade adores bushy eyebrows, the next plucks them into oblivion, and then the cycle begins again. Shoes, hair, makeup, height, skin tone, it all shifts, like the seasons, like the flicker of firelight. What seems beautiful in one moment is mocked in the next. And that is the great reminder. There is no ultimate rule. There never was. Attraction is fluid, always changing, always bending to circumstance. To be hot in one era is to be overlooked in another. To be admired in one place is to be average in another. And yet, people cling to these standards as if they were carved into stone. There's a comfort in realizing it's all a little absurd. That the things you worry about, your hair, your skin, your height, your scars, were once admired, once teased, once whispered about around a fire, just like this moment, long before you were born. Your flaws are ancient. Your quirks are prehistoric. Someone, somewhere, loved them enough to pass them down, and now you carry them, just as future people will carry yours. So let the tension slip away. Let the comparisons fade. Think about how many times people have changed their minds about what's beautiful. Think about how even Neanderthals probably rolled their eyes at someone trying too hard, or laughed at a hairstyle gone wrong. Think about how many billions of lives have come and gone, all of them fussing over looks that vanished into dust. None of it lasted. What lasted was the laughter, the warmth, the connection, the survival. That is the only standard that matters. As you sink deeper into calm, picture yourself by the fire, surrounded by your ancestors. They gossip, they laugh, they admire, they tease. They are just like you, and you are just like them. Their standards are gone, yours will fade, but the essence remains. The need to connect, to be seen, to be loved. That is timeless. That is what you carry. And that is all you need as you drift into sleep. wrapped in the warmth of absurdity, soothed by the knowledge that beauty has always been a passing joke. What matters is that you are here, alive, a living echo of a million choices. That is enough. That is everything. And now, it's time to let the fire in your mind burn low and the world grow quiet. Close your eyes, breathe deeply, and sleep well. You've earned it. If you're already drifting, let go and dream. But if you're somehow still awake, go ahead and click on one of the two videos glowing on your screen. Each one will carry you deeper into the strange and soothing mysteries of the past. And don't forget to subscribe, so you'll always have another story waiting to guide you gently into rest.